Tina Desiree Berg, and welcome to the 34th. Hi, I'm Tina Desiree Berg, and I am in studio with Sean Beckner Carmichael, and we have a very special guest with us today. It is General Jeff, who is known as the mayor of Skid Row. Welcome, General Jeff.
Hey, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I think you do really important work in Skid Row, and I want to, with Sean, illuminate that work that you're doing. A lot of folks have some misunderstandings about downtown Los Angeles. They have misunderstandings about the history of Skid Row. But first, let's talk a little bit about you, your activism. So you're known as the mayor of Skid Row. Tell us some of the stories that brought you to that place of activism and stories that helped shape your viewpoint and the work that you do now.
Okay, it's really simple. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I care greatly about my city, and I feel that the city of LA could be the greatest city in all the world. And so they don't need my help in Beverly Hills. They seem to be doing quite well there. And since Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles is also commonly known as the homeless capital of America, so that automatically makes it the homeless capital of LA. And so I figured, let me roll up my sleeves and go where the most need is. And so I intentionally reduced myself to a state of homelessness, and so that I can learn the lingo, the mannerisms, the mindset. And next thing you know, I walked into Skid Row. I moved to Skid Row in August 2006, and I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. So the background of Skid Row is also, fraught with misconceptions. Skid Row is an actual neighborhood in Los Angeles. I think a lot of people think that it's some term that came to use because of the unhoused population, which is not necessarily the case. What is your viewpoint of how Skid Row came to be?
Well, I mean, the history of Skid Row, as far as the name, it actually started in the Pacific Northwest. For those that really don't know the true backstory, up in the timber mills in the Pacific Northwest, and everyone knows they have a lot of trees in the Pacific Northwest due to the constant rainy weather. And so what they would do, they would cut down the timber, and the timbers would skid down the road, ROAD, down to the timber mills where they would get treated and things of that sort. And so it used to be seasonal work in the beginning, but just like today's corporate America, they realized they could maximize their profits if they went year round. And so because the seasonal workers would come in from out of town, do the work, send the money home, and then go back when the season was over. And so when they transferred over to year round, they needed housing. So the owners of the timber mills built rows of hotels for the seasonal workers to stay year round a little bit longer. And so then with the hotels came the bars and the brothels. And, so it's, hey, while they're working and off days. And so it got to a point where a lot of guys wound up inebriated, not showing up for work, not sending the money home to feed their families, not going home because they fall in love with prostitutes, things of that sort. And they became down and out. So It converted from Skid Row, ROAD, to Skid Row for the rows of hotels for the down and out. So that's what it started up in the Pacific Northwest. And so then there became Skid Row areas all across of America. And so like in New York, it's called the Bowery. In San Francisco, it's called the Tenderloin. Right. And they've got them all across. And so then in downtown Los Angeles, it was there because of the train station to the eastern side of downtown Los Angeles. And it was the same concept. Folks from out of town would come in for seasonal work. And again, there were the cheap hotels were right there. And so in the late 1800s, it converted from, so a lot of people, some of our folks, Skid Row say, so Skid Row started out with hardworking folks, hardworking individuals. So, they want to keep that out there. And so then in the late 1800s, it converted from hardworking men to down and out. And Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, it's been that way ever since. And all the way until where it is now.
And General, could I ask a question for those of us who don't know? And I know sometimes the borders over the years, some would argue have moved, some would argue have contested. What would you say that the actual location of Skid Row is in Los Angeles currently?
Sure, there've been different. Over the years, there've been different court settlements, different legal parameters. What we know is from the mid 1970s when the Skid Row containment zone was established. The hard boundaries of Skid Row: 3rd Street to the north, 7th Street to the south, Main Street to the west, and Alameda Street to the east. 50 city blocks. And so understand, it's not just like an encampment area for homeless folks. There are thriving businesses all throughout, different types of businesses all throughout the Skid Row area. It's just that area also includes homelessness.
Right. So is that also where the single room occupancy hotels got their root? Is in that history?
That's exactly that. So those same hotels that were it began for the seasonal workers in the late 1800s. Those cheap hotels just got converted, and so it's a matter of a zoning change because the names are still called hotels. They're not called. While we know them as SROs and they're zoned as SROs, they're still called like the Sanborn Hotel, the Simone Hotel. It still sounds like it's an actual cheap hotel that it just anybody can pull up and go in, but they're actually individual apartment buildings for low income individuals.
Right. I think the egregious part of their history also is the fact that for a long time, and I think it still happens a little bit, even though it shouldn't be, the SROs would evict people before the 27-day occupancy tenancy could be formulated, because that allowed them to escape tenancy laws. And there was I know the Inner City Law Center had at one point did a giant lawsuit over that.
That's called the 28-day shuffle. Absolutely. Yeah, it's on the books. And so there's been a lot of maneuvering, quote unquote maneuvering, if you will, but there's been a lot. There are covenants that are in place on these as single room occupancies. And so now that extend up for 55 years. And even when those run out, they can be extended for additional 55 years. So during our lifetime, the SROs will pretty much stay in the same capacity that they are. And even if any type of rich developers want to come in and maybe bulldoze those and build some luxury lofts, due to the Atlas Act, they have to replace those units at a 1-to-1 ratio. So in essence, if they bought a building, a SRO, and tore it down to build a luxury condo, in essence, they would have to be building two buildings, because not only would they build their luxury loft, they would also have to replace those SROs.
Right.
So it's not cost effective to invest in two buildings like that. And so that the covenants actually preserve the SRO housing units.
Right. And the egregious part too is that a lot of the folks that own these hotels, like I know one particular hotel that the Inner City Law Center went after, the owner lived in Hillsborough, which is a very wealthy suburb of San Francisco. And if you go inside, I went inside one of these rooms and I was appalled by what I saw. You had a room that was just infested with both rodents and bugs of all sorts, cockroaches, other bed bugs, etc. The ceiling was missing. You had leaky plumbing that was just dripping down into the room from the unit above. And yet, folks are paying rent to live in these units. It's absolutely outrageous.
Well, that was many moons ago. I don't know what year that was.
This was like 2008, I would say.
Yeah, that was the health department does annual inspections.
Okay.
There are federal regulations through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that require annual regulations to get, it's government subsidized funding. So no matter what, so it's low income housing. So whatever your income is, you pay 1/3 of your income. And then the other 2/3 is government subsidized. And so part of the stipulations of a government subsidy is that the owners and operators are subjected to annual inspections from the health department. So
that's great.
While there are older buildings that are still in a bit of a state of a disrepair, the newer buildings are immaculate. If you took them and put them in Beverly Hills, you wouldn't even know that it was an SRO low-income building.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's great.
They may
news.
not have the swimming pool and the sauna and some of those amenities, but they really look really nice inside. Full-size kitchen, full-size refrigerator, They've got some good amenities enough to if you say it's homeless, it's decent, it's respectable
Okay,
now.
great.
So we've come a long way.
We
And
have
so
come a long way.
there's
I'm happy to hear that. So what was the impetus for having that happen? Was it the government funding coming in?
I'm sorry, repeat.
What was the impetus for that change happening? Was it the government funding coming in?
I would say it was us activists
Okay.
speaking out and complaining
Yeah.
about the deplorable slumlord conditions to the point where we the people, the folks outside of outside of Skid Row, the concerned citizens of America heard and said, "Oh, this is a disgrace. Something needs to be done." And so the change happened.
Excellent.
So it's we the people that fought for change, and it's happened. And so
Generally, that's the case. Activists are always the folks that end up making it happen and pushing through electoral politics, right?
Absolutely, and it goes on to this day, and
Yeah.
it can be seen widely spread all across America to this day. So absolutely, props to us activists out there. Yay!
General, you did mention that I think when people think of Skid Row, they think of a very specific part of Skid Row, primarily where the Unhoused congregate. You mentioned that there were, thriving businesses. You mentioned that there were nice rooms without giving a free ad for sort of a gentrifying force. Are there any places where you really think that if someone perhaps isn't familiar with the downtown Los Angeles area, familiar with the Skid Row area, is there a place where you think that people should congregate, like a nice coffee shop or anything like that? Again, without giving an ad to a gentrifying force.
Are you saying people outside of Skid Row where they should congregate? Are you saying where people in Skid Row should congregate? I couldn't.
I
really
guess
hear
both. To be honest with you, honestly, I was asking one question, but you heard a better question.
Well, the unfortunate thing, and something that I personally have been fighting for as an activist, is there is no welcome center in Skid Row. So, one thing about, Los Angeles being the #2 media market in all of America, there's a lot of news stories constantly flying out all over the world about homelessness, the homeless conditions in Los Angeles. And so some smaller cities portray it, they see that Los Angeles seems to be doing better than them. And so next, they encourage their homeless folks to go west, young man, go west, as the old saying would be. And so a lot of those folks migrate to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And so they don't know the land, they don't know, the layout, they don't know where the services are. Even if they can find a mission, they don't know what time they feed, what time they, cut hair, or what time you can speak to a counselor or a case manager. There's a lot they don't know. And so I myself have encouraged, there are 4 major missions in Skid Row, and it has been here as long as 1891. They've been in business over 100, a couple of them over 100 years here in Skid Row. And we've asked them to put up bulletin boards outside so people can see what services they provide, the times, because unfortunately, like when the saying goes, Las Vegas is the city that never sleeps. Well, Skid Row is the community that never sleeps. And people need to know, when services are actually being provided. But most of them are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. And what we're fighting for is a 24-hour service provider area. And so in Skid Row, there is no coffee shop, if you will. People congregate on the sidewalk when sometimes we hold our community meetings right on street corners, just because we don't own any buildings. And so we do have a couple of business owners that are supportive of and empowering the residents, and they'll allow us to have meetings on their property. There's only a few, but and especially for myself, because where I'm established. But it's for folks outside of the community. There are many locations throughout downtown Los Angeles where they can meet, and there's an organization called the CCA, the Central City Association, acronym is CCA, and they're pretty much the head of the downtown business sector, and that's who I would encourage outsiders to contact for all of that information that you're asking about.
I've personally witnessed some community outreach from some of the business owners there, and it is refreshing to see.
Yeah.
So I think let's get a little bit into the meat and potatoes. So you were heavily involved in the attempt for a formation of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council back in 2017.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about what the goal was there?
Absolutely. So understand, I'm the chair of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee, and I want to start off by saying that effort is still continuing.
Oh, good.
So the thing was, we had an election in 2017 to form, and so currently Skid Row is a part of the larger Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. And because Downtown Los Angeles got this revitalization boom going, that so many bars and hotels and restaurants and all these new businesses coming in, that Skid Row is pretty much put on the back burner. And because of our homeless issues and other concerns within our community, we felt like we shouldn't be playing second fiddle to anybody, especially at that time, because we can see how homelessness is starting to bubble like a volcano, lava in a volcano. And, we don't want it to explode without the resources and the focused solutions. And so we've got to create this Skid Row Neighborhood Council. And so actually the effort started years prior to that, but it led up to our big election on April 6th of 2017. And so they said we came 60 votes short, 6-0. And so things have stayed the way they are, and that's why homelessness is out of control. And so the thing about a Skid Row Neighborhood Council, it would allow for definitely more focused meetings about Skid Row. Let's say if there's a monthly meeting for the board of directors of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council, those are 12 meetings. And then if you have multiple 5 to 10 committees that focus on whether it's trash, parks, different committees, you could possibly have anywhere from as low as few as 50 to as many as 100 meetings per year, just about Skid Row and homelessness. And that would actually expedite the conversations. There would be a specific location where outsiders could, tap into. People say, hey, I want to help homeless folks. Where do I go? They can go this place or that place, maybe a mission, but it doesn't help the overall community.
Right.
So a lot of people get attached to one mission and they'll just be stuck in that one mission. But as I said earlier, Skid Row is 50 blocks. So there's a whole community that some 49 and a half other blocks that they would be missing. And so with a Skid Row Neighborhood Council, they can come to one entity, connect with one entity, and connect to the entire community. And so on the Skid Row Neighborhood Council board seats, when we do get the Skid Row Neighborhood Council, we're very confident that it'll happen. There will be seats for residents. There will be seats for business owners. There'll be, at-large seats for regular, random Skid Row stakeholders, anybody in our community, and others. And so we want to make sure there's a full spectrum, that all the whole spectrum, all perspectives are represented and have a seat at our decision-making table. And not only would the Skid Row Neighborhood Council be able to create homeless solutions for ourselves, but also solutions that would spread not only nationwide, but also possibly create initiatives where that would go worldwide. So right now, while we lost that election, because there were, let's just say we feel that we were treated unfairly.
You were.
There's some illegal things that happened, and so we filed a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles, who administered that election. And we went to trial in February of 2020.
Right.
We lost the trial. It was technicalities, not based on the merits of the case. And so we filed an appeal, and that's where we are now. We filed an appeal. Unfortunately, the court systems have shut down because of COVID. But our opening brief for our appeal is due coming up, and we're very, very confident that we will be successful in our appeal.
Got it. So, so you're appealing the decision on February 5th, despite the fact that the city threw out quite a few online votes, and despite the fact that the election came down to, I think you said 60 votes, a judge denied invalidating the results of the election, despite the city acknowledging that online votes are being destroyed. This is a pretty easy question to answer, but do you feel as though that was a fair and just election?
Well, we don't. That's what we're exactly what we're suing about. The city hasn't officially proven that we lost the election. They came out with an announcement after the election was over with and said, you lost, and you lost by 60 votes. And when we asked for a recount, specifically, that was the first time that online voting was used for a subdivision election.
Right.
And the process was murky at best. And so then we've asked the city time and time again to validate the electronic online voter tallies and produce that. First, they would preserve it and then produce it, and they haven't done either. And so because of that, they can't prove and they can't validate any of the online votes.
Right.
So how can they say that we lost if they can't prove it?
Can I ask you a question? How did they decide to do this online voting thing in the first place? Because I'm still not clear on that decision.
Yeah, that was a last minute move that happened less than 2 weeks before our election. And seeing that, Skid Row is a lot of homeless folks that don't have smartphones, don't have laptops or desktops. So the online voting component was definitely not in our favor. And so, the thing is about the subdivision ordinance, it says that there will be one physical polling place within the proposed boundaries.
Yeah.
And so within the boundaries that I mentioned, there was going to be one voting location in Skid Row. And so the thing about the outside the downtown business sector, apparently they were in fear of coming into Skid Row to vote. So they figured approve online voting, and then they can just vote from the safe comforts of their homes. And so they lobbied City Hall very, very hard. And then City Council member Jose Huizar, who has now been arrested by the feds, and it's he's got a whole nother thing. And so you know what that is. And so again, less than 2 weeks before our election, he led the charge in City Hall to approve online voting, even though it was a temporary ban across the city because they had implemented online voting the year before in 2016, and it was a fiasco.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of our issues, that they allowed online voting just for our one election, subdivision election, while they still continued the ban citywide. And so there's not just one issue of online, but there's countless issues that we've put before, to the point where it's probably overwhelming for any judge to a jury to really swim through to understand what it is. And so, they're like, only just, lift up, our counselors telling us, our legal counsel say, just only lift up, the smoking guns, the important points. It's all smoking guns. It's all, it's all important. You can't put one more so than the other. It's crazy. It's like Keystone Cops administered this election, but unfortunately it's so convoluted that they just explain it away because they're the big, powerful city of Los Angeles, and we're just supposed to blindly accept their decisions that they made, even though they can't prove that the votes that they claim happened.
Right, because there's no paper trail. I'm a big believer in everything should have a paper trail. I think that was a really crazy decision that was made, and that was made by City Hall, it sounds like, ultimately.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
all right.
Just quickly, while in the state of California, all regular elections, and even in the state of California, overseen by the California State, the Secretary of State, and online voting is not allowed.
No, it's not allowed because it's very problematic.
And so, but neighborhood councils are not are under the oversight of the Secretary of State.
Right.
They're actually governed by local politics, which means the city of Los Angeles oversees itself. And there's where the system is rigged. There it is, right there.
Yeah, and here's the thing, General. Even if it wasn't rigged, we have no way of knowing. They should be, in the very least, concerned of how bad those optics are. It's a PR nightmare.
Absolutely. And then there's an additional layers of optics of little old Skid Row, the homeless capital of America, has got to fight to take city of Los Angeles to court to sue just to get our Skid Row neighborhood council to help end homelessness, which is out of control. And we only want to do that because we don't want to live on the sidewalks.
Right.
See, there's a lot of messaging. A lot of people say, "Oh, they just want to live on the sidewalks." No, we don't. That's why we're creating the Skid Row Neighborhood Council. Why? Because now we want to get to the deep layers, like you mentioned moments ago, the meat and potatoes. There's poverty pimping, what I call poverty pimps alive and well in Skid Row, and that ties into the homeless industrial complex. Was a phrase that I coined a few years ago, because as long as homelessness continues to exist, the CEOs and executive directors of these large missions and social service providers and nonprofits, they get six-figure salaries as high as $200,000 and $300,000 a year in Skid Row. And so as long as homelessness is on the sidewalks, it's job security for them, and they continue to get paid.
Yeah.
So you touched on something that I think we both really admire you for talking about, which is this industrial complex. That, I mean, if you spend any time in really any area where there are a lot of unhoused, you can witness it for yourself. You'll see organizations that will sort of fulfill one very small need, and then leave. How do we actually help end houselessness? How do we actually really get at the root of these issues? How do we really solve the problem?
There's a multi-layered, thank you for that. That's such an important question, and it's a multi-layered answer because it all comes down to on a case-by-case basis, where each individual has to ask themselves that question. But connected to that question is, how much time do they have to commit to that answer, to that situation? And so it's what I call the threes. Some people is only what I call it 3 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. Pick your three. Which category of a three are you in? Some people, if they only got a couple of minutes, or just come down and pass out a bottle of water, a blanket or something, and they wipe their hands, like, well, I did all I could. I've got to go back to my own life. I'm struggling there. Understandable. Thank you. We really appreciate it. There are others that can stay a little bit longer. Hey, I got a little bit more time. What can I do to help? I asked them, well, what can you do? If you can't cook, don't get into anybody's kitchen and say, cook this food. No. If you don't know how to cook, we don't need you in the kitchen. But if you know how to sew, if you know how to change oil, oil change on a car, teach someone how to do what you're good at. And then and then the long term, it gets into the political parts of it. If people have the political wherewithal, and so for the short term is sending an email to a local, state, or federal politician. There are 3 layers of government: local, state, and federal. By sending an email, making phone calls, letting them aware of it. The unfortunate part is, the parameters for homelessness go all the way, come out of Washington, D.C., the federal government. So, again, as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, they set the parameters and also the stipulations. So a lot of the nonprofits where the poverty pimping is actually technically legally allowed because it's within federal regulations. And so they can, get $1 million, and 85% of that can go towards quote unquote administrative costs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, so
instead of actually solving the problem, yes.
And so then you got to change the parameters within HUD before we can actually complain and point fingers at the nonprofits and themselves. And so it's very, very frustrating because, you point fingers at one person and say, well, it's not because of me, it's because of them, 3,000 miles away. And it's very difficult for us in Skid Row to constantly get to any congressional meetings 3,000 miles away.
Right.
They're actually, it's extremely difficult for us to deal with the politics of Skid Row. So that's why, another reason why with the Skid Row Neighborhood Council, we can have some type of governing body that may be able to shoot an email or an official letter that will get an audience with some congressional senator or someone, hopefully, and even if it got, it'll be luckily a president or a vice president, to hear what we have to say. It's extremely difficult. And then if we have allies that could move for us, and so we're trying to build allies, all across the nation. And so then, those that represent us on the East Coast could possibly get, they could get to Washington, D.C. faster than we can. So,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of building and networking, and it's going to take time. Unfortunately, our fellow homeless brothers and sisters are dying on the sidewalks. And right now it's the winter time. The rain is already cold, extremely cold at night. While they say, "Oh, Los Angeles, oh, it's beautiful sunny weather," like in the background of behind you guys right now. But at nighttime, it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't if you're not prepared for it. Especially if you have to sleep outdoors constantly, and then just the conditions. And then when it rains, the conditions get even that much more
Right.
extreme. And so it's unfortunate. The death ratio in Skid Row alone is more than 2-1. And then you have, on top of all that, we've got a global pandemic. And when they say shelter at home, what if you don't have
Have
a
a
home?
home. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many, so all these perimeters and so-called solutions, they're not applicable to Skid Row. So again, we need our own Skid Row Neighborhood Council to, introduce our own solutions and policies, and then, go from there. So it's a lot of work. A lot of people don't have that time to invest like that. And so that's why you have activists like myself, and there's several others that are connected into Skid Row directly or in Skid Row directly. And we do all the heavy lifting. Because we're committed. I put my personal life on hold to come here just to do this because it needs to be done. So,
Ooh, yeah. I mean, look, in the very least, you'd have the ear of the mayor's office, which is the absolute intention of the neighborhood councils, is for more citywide local government to happen. And the unfortunate problem is if you're part of the downtown LA neighborhood council, that neighborhood council is chock full of real estate developers, right?
Absolutely.
So this is all about real estate development money. Jose Huizar, what he's been indicted for is real estate development money corruption. So,
Yes.
I mean, really, this is what's driving, I think, a lot of these problems is the real estate developers own the local government in many ways. And obviously, real estate development means that there's less affordable housing and close to no housing or help for the unhoused. I mean, it's absolutely egregious. It's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And the city of LA needs to do something about it.
Yeah, and so that we're hoping that the federal, the feds will come in and clean up the corruption.
Yeah.
A lot of, again, as you mentioned, a lot of the folks that the entities and that you mentioned in terms that are connected to the downtown business sector.
That's right.
We have the emails through PRA requests. We've done a lot of digging, our own level of private investigations, and we've uncovered that a lot of these folks are directly connected to the prevention of our Skid Row Neighborhood Council.
Right.
And that's because with the creation of a Skid Row Neighborhood Council, that means Skid Row plants roots. We have official boundaries. We are a community that, we can plant roots, and it'll be much more difficult for them to uproot us. Other than that, Skid Row is prime real estate. The developers want to develop on that, and they've got this downtown revitalization where they want more hotels, skyscrapers, things of that sort. Plus, they've, at that time, they had, a few years ago, they had a direct pipeline overseas international investments. And from what I know is about at least $100 billion ready to come into downtown LA specifically. And the only thing that was holding that up was Skid Row. And so those very business interests that you mentioned, they're still to this day trying to delete and eliminate the existence of Skid Row. So of course they were going to oppose the Skid Row Neighborhood Council. So they lobbied City Hall very well, and the politicians buckled under the pressure because they need the campaign contributions.
That's right.
And there you go. We never had a fighting chance. So instead of it being like David versus Goliath, it was David against 20 or 30 Goliaths. And you only got one rock. How you gonna make that work? So, yeah. But we're still fighting. The little engine that could is still chugging along.
Yes, thank God. Somebody needs to.
You spoke a little bit about COVID. You spoke a little bit about the rise of rates of the unhoused in Los Angeles. And you spoke a little bit about the mayor, Mayor Garcetti. Under his tenure, houselessness rates have increased about 40%. We are looking at current death rates of 4 unhoused people passing away per day. And
Wow.
in addition to that, we are seeing him make comments. I'm sure you've already seen it, stating that cleaning up the unhoused, assisting the unhoused, is not. This is a paraphrase. Please put the direct quote up. But stating that it's not the city's responsibility to take care of the unhoused. Do you think it's time for a change in the mayor's office? Have you had any response from Garcetti since he took office?
I've known Garcetti again. I came to Skid Row in August 2006, and I've known Garcetti in me fighting my efforts to address Skid Row and homelessness on all political levels. I've known Garcetti since he was a city council member, before he was city council president, before he became mayor. So we go back over 10 years. We're very, very familiar with each other. Clearly, we're on opposite ends of this spectrum, unfortunately, and that's why Garcetti's career did not extend to Washington D.C.
That's right.
When the new presidential administration came in, and I was very vocal in public about it, that would not happen. While he had the big ticket items, HHH, $1.2 billion. Oh, he brought NFL football back to Los Angeles. Oh, the Olympics is coming in 2028. So on his resume, as a mayor, he's got all these big ticket items. But I always said homelessness was the issue that was going to bring his career to a screeching halt, and it has. And so unfortunately, he's scrambling to try to do whatever he can. But the next, so it's not even about removing him. We're looking forward to 2022, which is less than 10 months from now. And so there will be a new mayor election. And then, and he'll be replaced. He'll be, a forgotten history, just like what happened in the White House. And it's time for move on. And so whatever new mayoral candidates that come online, they better understand that Skid Row and homelessness better be at the forefront of their campaign platform. Because if not, their campaigns will suffer greatly as well.
Yeah. On that note, let me ask you about Project Room Key, which is was supposed to be one of Garcetti's solutions to the problem during COVID. What can you tell me about Project Room Key and why it hasn't worked?
Well, first of all, the way I learned, Project Room Key started out as California Governor Gavin Newsom. That was his solution. Then as statewide. And then Mayor Garcetti announced it like it was a separate Project Room Key of additional 50, not combined 15,000. So that would sound like there's 30,000 hotel rooms that are coming online. 15,000 in the city of Los Angeles, along with 15,000 statewide in California, which was not the case. And so there was misrepresentation there, which is disingenuous. The funding ran out. When they mentioned Project Room Key, it sounded like it would be long-term solution. Come to find out, it was only a 90-day solution. Not only was it 90 days, the last that I knew, we got some wonderful folks that are inside that help share the truth, the real numbers. I believe it was about 4,000. There were 4,400 motel hotel rooms that were paid for. But I believe they got to like 3,900 that actually had tenants inside of them. So they didn't even get past 5,000. When they're talking about getting close to 15,000, they fell well short of expectations. The funding has completely run out, and now they're looking for new funding to put into that program. And so, but they don't mention these things when they roll it out. It sounds like it's got all the bells and whistles. The mainstream media is falling all over their every word and pushing it out there like, these are just the greatest politicians ever, when it's like, it's just a smoke and mirrors campaign. And at the end of the day, it's us homeless folks on the sidewalks who suffer. Yeah. And so Project Room Key was not the mother of all solutions. It wasn't even, it shouldn't even qualify as a solution. It was just a temporary quick fix while they buy time to possibly come up with another $1 billion ballot initiative to try to fool us voters into thinking we're on our way. We just need you to donate just to vote and give us another $1 billion, and then by the time that money runs out, we have new solutions. And so all their solutions do is overlap. So before they get exposed as, frauds, that their solutions on the tables now did not work. Before we get to that point, they'll overlap it with new solutions here, there, on a local, state, and federal level. And then they never conclude. They just morph and merge into the next solution, so-called solution.
Right.
In essence, in politics, that's what they call kicking the can down the street.
That's exactly.
We'll pick it up later. Just kick the can down the street.
But they never pick it up, right? That's the problem. They never seem to. I mean, we can go back to the time when Ronald Reagan was governor to look at the real turning point as to how we got here, some of the things that he did. And there's never been any real solutions put on the table since. Between, and it's both parties, let's be honest. It's the neoists, the neoliberals, the neoconservatives in both parties. They want to privatize everything, and it's become the free market's the moral arbiter. Well, the reality is the free market isn't the moral arbiter of anything in this capacity. It's just not. And at some point, we have to deal with the human consequence of that.
Well, what I have to say to that is, we have to break it all the way down to the bare bones of what this country is, but the bare foundation of what the country is built on, the principles this country is built on. This is a capitalistic society, capitalism. Let's start there. So when we talk about equity, equity cannot exist. Equity, which is equality. Equality cannot exist in a capitalist society. Somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. And now, after we've gone through generations of folks putting their finger on the scale, those in power, the powers that be, putting their finger on the scale, especially with deregulating everything.
That's right.
And so now that they're so they can determine the outcomes, what's called the quote unquote desired outcomes. And as far as homelessness now, homelessness in America is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so one thing about America prides itself on creating jobs. Creating jobs is probably America's number one economic focus. And in homelessness, it's no longer about helping homeless people. It's about using homeless people to create jobs for Americans.
God. Yeah,
and so,
I see your point.
And those are the very principles that this country was built on. And so some people want to argue against me and have debates. You're not arguing with me. You're arguing against the American principles, the principles that the founding fathers, built this country on. And so once we get past that, then we can understand how Skid Row has become, homelessness has expanded, exploded, if you will, to where it is today, because the more people that are homeless, the more jobs that are created to take care of them. And so that's the driver of homelessness right now is capitalism. So there's extreme greed now in the homeless industry. That's why we call it
in the homeless industry. That's where we're at, huh? Wow.
So that actually leads me to, I'm curious about your feelings about this. We've been talking about the different levels. We've been talking about privatizing services for the unhoused. Probably the largest high-profile event that's happened in Skid Row was a attempted, church group assistance from Sean Fucht.
We're out here in Skid Row, and we came out here not knowing that there was a protest. We were actually here last week, and we were giving out food to the homeless. And right now what we have is Black Lives Matter, and we have some Christians here. And there's a lot of conflict. So I have no idea about Sean, this person that they're talking about.
Is anyone thirsty? Come and drink, even if you have no money.
Leave the unhoused community alone.
Why are you spending your money on food that doesn't satisfy? Why pay for food that does you no good? The Lord Jesus Christ has provided the eternal bread for our souls.
With your own selfish needs.
You're taking care of your bodies. You're taking care of your bodies with your masks and social distancing, but what about your soul?
Obviously, that group walked in largely unmasked, and there was a pretty large mass resistance from both the community and
Yeah.
activists. But I'd like to kind of expand beyond that story. In general, in unhoused communities, you see a lot of church groups show up, some of them for the day, some of them more consistently. Are these church groups, do you find that they're actually assisting the community, or is there perhaps maybe they're fulfilling their own spiritual need?
It's both. Going back to when I talk about choose your lane of three. Some of these folks, the very first one was three. The 3-second lane was, passing out a bottle of water, passing out a blanket, and the religious folks, they come here. And so this group that you're specifically mentioning, they're not the first religious group to come to Skid Row, and they won't be the last. Right. Religious groups have been from outside Skid Row, have been coming to Skid Row for decades. They're more than welcome. There's no gate point where you have to come through the checkpoints. Who are you? What are your intentions? There's none of that. It's free borders. People come and go. People, for the most part, have true intentions. There's a spiritual energy already in Skid Row. It's not like Skid Row is this lawless land or this non-religious, non-spiritual area where we need outsiders to come in and provide that for us. It's already here. Pastor Q, John Marie, Pastor Q is our lead Skid Row, grassroots Skid Row pastor. And his organization is a Church Without Walls, because he does his ministry in Skid Row right on the street corner. He doesn't do it inside the building. He does it outdoors. The Church Without Walls is called The Row. And Pastor Q reached out to these folks when they were coming, because we did outreach and found out, hey, they're not wearing masks. This is Skid Row. We've got a whole lot of concern in terms of germs, disease, health conditions, deplorable conditions, and then there's a global pandemic. The last thing we need is any potential COVID spreading energies to come into our community. And so he took the initiative, Pastor Q, to connect with those folks, and basically he told them, reach out to us, let's communicate, extended our olive branch, and none of his attempts to connect with them were returned. So, and then it was like, well, if you guys are going to be disrespectful to our community, don't come. We appreciate it, thanks, but no thanks. Mm-hmm. And that's when it became a media frenzy, because these folks said, we're coming anyway. Right. And then it'd be, okay, wait. You can't just show up in anybody's door, go into anybody's house and just say you're going to do whatever you want to do. You can't just, like, somebody can't come into your house and just kick your door in, go in your fridge, kick their feet up on your table, grab the remote and just turn to it. Hold on, why are you here? You can't come into anybody. Name me any. You can't go into Beverly Hills like that. Right. You can't go into, Boyle Heights. You can't go into any community anywhere and just do whatever it is you want to do. So that's disrespectful to our Skid Row community. One, you don't respect us as a community. If a lot of people think Skid Row is just a bunch of transients and vagabonds. They're not property owners, and we could just go in and just take it over. We just because we don't own the property, we live here. Right. It's been Skid Row for over 100 years. If anybody thinks they're just going to roll up into Skid Row and do whatever they want to do, there's going to be strong pushback because we're living within our rights. Mm-hmm. And so out of fear for, with death already upon our door, you just read the statistics moments ago about a 4-to-1 death ratio, how people are dying. Compare that to any other community in America, and that has a 4-to-1 ratio. Right. And so now you got these folks coming in with some super spreader, anti-masker energy, unwanted, uninvited, unauthorized, and they're just gonna, throw their elbows around, throw their weight around, and bully homeless people that are weak, vulnerable, and already near death. Yeah, that's just, we cannot allow this type of energy to happen. And so, Pastor Q put out the call, and we had a whole bunch of allies, both in Skid Row. We rallied in Skid Row, and people outside of Skid Row came, and we met them right there. Before you cross into Skid Row, you're going to get resistance the entire time you're here, and that's what we did. and that's why their event wasn't successful in Skid Row.
No, and it was.
And let me conclude with this: the main guy didn't even show up.
No, he didn't even. I was just going to say that. He didn't even show up. And also, General Jeff, it seems to me that they were being rather self-indulgent when they were even trying to, when they showed up and were trying to get in there. When they weren't allowed to go into the places that they wanted to, they ended up just being very loud and singing on a street corner where people were trying to sleep. It just felt very self-indulgent to me.
And what a lot of the media, mainstream media, did capture, but we've got it on video. There's a grassroots, local, community-based guy that spent a lot of time at one point in time in a state of addiction on these Skid Row streets, and now he's cleaned himself up, and he has a street corner, street vendor.
Right.
Set up a canopy and sells food on the street corner.
That's right.
And these folks just came all in front of his business.
That's right.
And we're giving away food where he's trying to make an honest buck to, there's the food place. Let's go take over that corner. And, they're singing, they turn on speakers, and he was overwhelmed, and they just basically completely interrupted his business.
Yeah.
And, it's just so disrespectful on so many levels.
It was disrespectful.
You can't go in front of a restaurant and then just start serving food. That's disrespectful, especially when it's Skid Row. And so, they cut off his livelihood. They didn't compensate him for his day's loss. It was just bad because when the people got the free food, then there's no need to pay him to buy his food.
Right, and it wasn't even like an actual meal. It was like crappy snacks. It wasn't, I wouldn't even call this like feeding the homeless, in my opinion.
Oh, were you there? How did you know?
Both of us were there.
We were both there, yeah.
Right, so you can speak to it firsthand that it wasn't, they're going to feed the homeless people, and it made it sound like it was this big, huge rollout, and
it was not.
By my count, there were about 30 bags of snacks that were handed
snacks,
out.
like crappy, bad for you. We went to the 99-cent store and bought whatever they had on clearance. It was really disrespectful.
And so, my efforts, because at first I wasn't going to go. People, like, again, religious groups come and go all the time. I don't see what's the big deal about these folks. Right. I don't know. They got a lot of fanfare. They're getting a whole lot of media attention to it. And I'm thinking, what is it that they actually intend on doing? I don't want to be a part of it. There's a lot of folks, you're the mayor of Skid Row. Let us get a photo op with you. And then the photos go out, look like I condone and support the event. And so I wasn't going to show, but then I wound up showing up later. And then there was the buses go down 5th Street.
Right.
So I basically focused on rerouting the buses so the public transportation service wouldn't get interrupted. That was my focus. And then I came down and, talked to some of the folks. And that's when I learned the main guy wasn't there. And they've got the B team is performing. It's nighttime. Folks are sleeping. You waking people up with this noise. Mm-hmm. What do you the poor logistics,
right?
They didn't speak with anybody in the community. What are the best areas to do whatever it is you're trying to do? And they just think they can come show up and we're gonna run to them, so then there's a whole lot of ego and arrogance. So if they're saying they're religious, normally you're humble, you're respectful, and I didn't see any of that. And so I went out and really tried to speak to some of those folks, and that's how I met you guys.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. This is veering very strongly into opinion territory, but as someone who's lived as an unhoused person, and often lives near unhoused areas, one of the things that often does not happen is, and it's a very simple solution, treating help with dignity. Yeah. If you're going into a situation where you're trying to help the unhoused, your first question should always be, how do I allow them to maintain their dignity? How do I allow them agency in their own life?
Absolutely.
And, I remember having a conversation with a group of them who were very, of course, offended that, there was that resistance. And I remember asking them, do you know what they actually need? And he looked at me like that was the silliest question in the world.
Right.
And I was like, just ask somebody you come across. If they need a toothbrush, there's a CVS a couple blocks away. assisting the unhoused as far as really truly ending houselessness is an incredibly complex, incredibly multi-tiered situation. Helping your neighbor on the street corner near you is quite simple and just requires a conversation and dignity.
Yeah.
And I witnessed a lot of that arrogance that you're speaking to. And I was really, really happy to see you sort of, and your work, I think, really focuses on not, ticky-tack situations. If someone doesn't have a job so they can't afford a toothbrush, the situation is not to give them a toothbrush. That's not going to fix the problem. They're going to need another thing in a day because they don't have a job. The situation requires ultimately, getting them a job or the assistance that they actually require. And I really admire that you're very outspoken about that and truly fixing houselessness.
If I may, let me just jump in while we're on this topic and just talk about my concerns for quote unquote the religious component of helping homeless people. When I saw firsthand this very group waking homeless people up, sleeping on the sidewalks, to scream them down, a super aggressive prayer style. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It was. They seemed a bit enraged. This wasn't a normal prayer, praying for people, if you will. It wasn't P-R-A-Y. It was more like P-R-E-Y. They were praying on people. It was very aggressive and highly unusual. There was no humble humility involved in terms of this religious energy. And so I just wanted to compare that to us activists in our community in Skid Row. We've already undergone that fight for many, many years, over 10 years. For me, I've been here, this is my 15th year in Skid Row. There are 4 major missions in Skid Row. 3 of them are faith-based. And that was part of my first early acts of activism here in Skid Row. Is people in the Skid Row community were constantly complaining about the faith-based missions where they come in the door for help and they're basically saying, oh, before we help you, you have to take this Bible. They basically shove a Bible down your throat. Right. And it's like, well, I just need a food. I need to rest my head. Like, can we, it's late. Can we talk about it in the morning? And it's like, no. You've got demons in you, or whatever the energy is. They shove a Bible down your throat. You try to rush you and sign you up into a program where they can get paid if you sign up in a program. And then, it's just these aggressive tactics that were, under the guise of, being involved in religion as opposed to really homeless service provider. And so there's a blurry line, and we've been already fighting that fight in Skid Row. So when these folks came in, it just opened up the old wounds. Right. And reminded, oh, not that again. That's what it was for us. This was nothing new. Again, religious folks come all the time. And a lot of times if, we'll talk to their leadership and they understand there was this one group that may come like 100 deep all the time and, pass out everyone, have a bottle of water. And with all the walking through all the trash that's going on, because at the time, City of Los Angeles wouldn't have trash cans out there because they didn't want homeless people to make bonfires or whatever the reason. They want the homeless conditions to exist. And so our whole thing is, well, how about half of you bring bottled waters, the other half you bring brooms and help us sweep up this trash. Right. And so there was one organization that did that, and they said they felt more empowered and got more out of it by sweeping up the trash for our community because they got instant gratification where they can see that cleaning up trash, it does more for our community than it does in them just passing out bottles of water. And so that's where, it's multi-pronged. They're doing something for homeless folks, but also they're receiving benefits and positive energies for themselves. And they said they got more benefit from through the cleaning up of the community. And so then there have been a couple of groups that said, hey, we no longer pass out bottles of water. We, since everybody else is doing it, we want to come down and we just have cleanup crews. Right. And so, so that's how us activists, how we, the people of Skid Row, when folks communicate with us, and as you said moments ago, ask did you ask them what they need? And so then that was a big, huge step. And as we fought, and then when they realized, okay, now that we swept up the trash, some of us got trash back. What do we do with it?
Right.
And there's now there's the next level. We don't have trash cans.
Wow.
And
yeah.
that's so then they joined us in that fight, and that's how City Hall would say, oh, we better put some trash cans out there. And so that's where we got the trash cans, and that's how we get the solutions.
Nice.
And it doesn't. We don't wait for the city to give us solutions because the solutions aren't coming. And so
Right.
that's how folks can help us in our community. And so we've got it figured out. We're not crying out saying, help, give us solutions. There's no one in Skid Row that has ever said that. We know what we need. No one's listening to us and
Right.
saying, helping us with what we need. So
Right.
it's very difficult, but that's where we are. So we have, it's built into our activism is outreach, classroom. Skid Row is also a classroom. People come to Skid Row. It's teaching moments happening all the time, 24/7. Again, Skid Row is a community that never sleeps. And
Right.
we've got to teach folks on how to help us. We've got to teach the politicians on how to, what actually solutions work and what don't. And we have to teach the Skid Row nonprofit organizations, stop poverty pimp and actually help the people. So there's a whole, it's just, the classroom is in session all over in Skid Row.
Right. Wow.
Wow, that was a big conversation.
I think that's a good end.
I have one more question
Okay.
for you because we've had this discussion before on the street. Actually, I think it was the Sean Fook Day. So obviously, right now, we talk about activists and sort of the general sort of role of an activist, where activism is going in general. There have been quite a few calls since May, in particular, of last year, to defund the police and reallocate money towards social programs.
Yeah.
Recently, a measure called Measure J was passed, which allocates about $150 million towards, broadly, the word social programs. Despite the fact that not all of those social programs in that budget hasn't entirely been finalized,
Right.
Are you seeing any of that money going towards the Skid Row community? And if so, is it working?
So when you talk about Measure J, great question, by the way. So when we talk about Measure J, I was not a part of that Measure J fight, because, there's, like, if there's an alphabet full of issues, some of us take, LMNOP, some are taking ABC, others are taking XYZ. You can't just be on every fight. All the Measure J was not one for me. I set that out. We have fellow activists in Skid Row. It's an organization, an actual grassroots nonprofit called Los Angeles Community Action Network. The acronym is LA CAN.
Yeah.
Yes, we can. So, so they were very, very involved in the Measure J ballot issue, and so obviously there was a successful campaign. And so, when you talk about, out of the George Floyd energy from last year, the hashtag defund the police energy, I was very involved in that. Still am. And so, because I've been out speaking against LAPD's bully tactics, since I first got to Skid Row. The very month that I got to Skid Row, August 2006, was the very month that LAPD launched the Safer Cities Initiative. And they were very aggressive in terms of criminalizing and handcuffing, arresting homeless people. And that was how they, quote unquote, planned on cleaning up our community. And so we were fighting that. And back then, that was before LAPD's new headquarters was built. So we were speaking before the LA Police Commission meetings at Parker Center. A lot of those issues were there, which has now been torn down. We're part of that energy as well. So we got a lot of little wins along the way. So defund the police was, I was outspoken all along saying, LAPD's budget is at $2 billion per year. It actually is at $3 billion now. They just got a pay raise. But, at $2 billion a year, we don't see, the necessary product in terms of what we need in terms of to protect and to serve.
Right.
And so with the George Floyd energy, there's another, now it's $3 billion. And we're saying this funded its majority of the city's budget. The city's got a, hiring
it's over
freeze.
50%.
They've got to fire employees, work furloughs. And it's just LAPD, being greedy, and the police unions being greedy, just absorbing. But again, we go back to the foundations of what this country was built on, is capitalism. and you have LAP, the Los Angeles Police Department, capitalizing full of greed, capitalizing on the city of Los Angeles' budget. And it's just, I've written op-eds, I've done a lot of speaking out against that, and so it's very disrespectful. But then, because when we learn, going back to me being born and raised in South Central Los Angeles, when I was growing up, where's the funding? Oh, all this funding comes to the city of Los Angeles every year. Funding comes out. The funding that would come to South Central Los Angeles, it would go to the Los Angeles Police Department. So then in 2006, going to the fighting the Safer Cities Initiative under then Police Chief Bill Bratton, come to find out the funding that would go to Skid Row for homelessness would go to LAPD. And so, in order for them, what they would do is anything that involved homelessness, if there's a cleanup crew for the trash, which, we created, we motivated then Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa to, give us a focused concentration of cleaning up the streets. And then, that we need to have the city employees need to be escorted by LAPD. So LAPD is written in the budget. Anything that has to do with the homeless solution, they need LAPD, and LAPD has brainwashed all these entities to say, you need law enforcement, we'll protect you, you have to be, because you're interacting with homeless folks. And then LAPD's written into the budgets. And so with them written into the budgets, and I don't know what, so they're driving up costs. And again, their budget is $3 billion now.
Right.
I don't see $3 billion worth, because crime is still happening, homeless, whatever they're supposed to be fighting against, LAPD, they've said it many times, they can't stop crime. They can't stop crime before it happens because they can't predict where crime is going to happen. All they do is show up after the crime, after the bank has been robbed, then they show up and take a report. The detectives do forensics, and then they, then they chase down and try to track that, but they can't stop crime from happening. And so there's this false misnomer through, we the people of America, law enforcement agencies across America got people fooled and thinking, this is their first layer of protection, the first responders. If anything, the law enforcement can stop crime from happening. That's absolutely not true. So then when you look at that, so when you've got cops running around giving traffic infractions, you ran a red light, and okay, leave that to the traffic people.
Right.
You're focused on something that, so when you start breaking down all the things that law enforcement actually does, then we realize they don't need this overblown, this bloated budget for all these things. So the Department of Transportation can put some guys out there to issue parking, tickets, violations, traffic violations. So then take that money away from LAPD and put it in the appropriate department. And you go, if there's a parade, we don't need LAPD, it's traffic control. And you start breaking it down and you're realizing, hey, why does LAPD get all of that money? It's just like when it comes to there's a death and the notify the next of kin. The coroner's office should notify the next of kin. Why does LAPD show up knocking on somebody's door with guns?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be nervous. Cops bamming on their door. Like, is there a problem? What's going on? Oh, no, we come in peace. But you got guns, hands on your guns, this intimidative thing, especially in, poorer communities, community brown and black and communities of color. Anytime the cops show up at your door, that means somebody's going to jail. So no, we don't want to open the door. We don't want to interact. It seems suspicious when all it is just a simple notification of next of kin. Well, let the coroner do it. There's no gun. There's no need for guns if you're notifying somebody that's their loved one died. What do you need guns and armor, body armor? So it's like, no. You can take that away from the LAPD's budget. And we ran through the line on it. There's some that are saying abolish the police, but defund the police and abolish the police are two different actions, different energy. We're saying defund the police and instead invest in communities. Because what we found that if you've got like we need after school programs, obviously now COVID is going on, but when the kids come out of school, give them something to do, otherwise they're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
That's a common, that's common sense and logic, folks. And so, senior citizens need, activities, get out of the house, exercise programs, So that funding is being sucked up by LAPD budget. And it's not saying, oh, we hate cops and, they just shouldn't have any budget. They should work for free. Nobody's saying that at all. Their budget is way overbloated.
It's way overbloated.
There's so much need across the state. And we can on paper, we point to their overbloated budget, or we could point to significant needs in our communities that do a better statistically job of keeping our communities safer and vibrant. And so it's not police don't make our communities safe, especially not minority communities.
I absolutely agree with you and endorse everything you just said a million times over. The LAPD budget is beyond bloated. It's 54% of the city of LA's budget. It doesn't need to be. We are sending cops to do work that they should not be involved in whatsoever. And it's leading to unnecessary violence. It's leading to unnecessary death. There's no two ways about it. So I agree with you on everything you just said. I think it's spot on.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. General, unless there's anything else that you wanted to say, I was going to ask you, I guess, is there a way to reach you? Is there a way to reach a really high-quality organization?
Yeah, who would you recommend? If somebody listens to this podcast and they're very motivated and encouraged by the things you are saying, what's a good way for them to follow your work?
Well, let me just say, I'm in the streets of Skid Row. I roll up my sleeves. I'm not doing this for the glory. I don't get paid. I'm 100% volunteer. I don't get paid to do what I do. 15 years for free. People try to question my motives. Oh, and he's got a hidden agenda. What is he up to? Why is he speaking out against the nonprofit missions and the social service providers that has been here for hundreds of years? Because you're not putting out a good product. And I want to close with this. If there's a good restaurant in town, the word gets out and there's a line around the corner.
That's right.
People can't wait to get in there. That's how it should be for these missions and social service providers in Skid Row. If they've actually got a great product, if they're as good as they say they are in their mission statements and their press releases, there should be a line around the corner of people trying to get those services. There's a reason why people aren't going in there. It's just like a restaurant serving bad food. You're serving bad food. Nobody wants to eat there. No one questions the missions and social service providers in Skid Row because, they always control the narrative.
Yeah.
And point fingers at the homeless people. Oh, they don't know what's best for them. Oh, they want to live on the streets. Oh, they're mentally ill. Oh, they're on drugs. There's nothing we could do. Blah, blah, blah. And they keep paying us. By the way, you can donate to us in our efforts.
Right.
Wait. What I'm saying on behalf of we, the people of Skid Row, it's time to turn around and look the other way and look at these missions, these service providers. What kind of product are they serving? What are they offering? We're not talking about what's on their websites. Come take a look. Pull in line. You eat that food. You tell us if it's quality. You get their services. You listen to their customer service skills and their people skills. As they don't know who you are, but when you get screamed at and yelled at and disrespectful, you don't want to go in those places. If there's a shelter and they've got bed bugs and it's unkept, it's unclean, but they're not lack of adequate security, instead of hiring their buddies, get some real security in there, because all of a sudden when I go to sleep and I wake up and my suitcase is gone, my backpack is gone, I don't want to stay there. I'd be better off staying by myself. And so there's a lot of different issues that don't get addressed, and there's no platform to listen to we the people. One thing I'll say is the LGBTQ people, they have amazing narrative. They control the narrative. It's called victim blaming. Don't blame them for the conditions that there's the societal struggles that they deal with. It should be the same viewpoint in terms of homeless folks. Stop blaming homeless people for everything. When homeless women are getting raped in tents, we're going through, so when you got homeless families out there, they got evicted because of, an evil landlord, we want to kick them out, or kick the babies out in the street. Don't say they're unfit parents. There's societal problems with that.
That's right.
There's a whole, stop victim blame when it comes to homelessness. Stop victim blaming when it comes to Skid Row. I just wanted to close with that. So, but I'm out in the streets, so I'm difficult. You want to find me, reach me, I'm in Skid Row.
Wow.
But
much respect, man.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Thank you. And so there's a lot of grassroots. I'm a grassroots guy. So there's a lot of grassroots. Technically, it's called community-based organizations, CBOs. I support those in Skid Row. So again, I already mentioned LA Can.
LA Can's great, yeah.
So I'm the chair of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee. We have a website, skidrowneighborhoodcouncil.com, spelled all the way out. That's where you can find me. There's a wonderful a nonprofit called Industrial District Green. And what they do is they plant trees in Skid Row and the next door neighboring community called Arts District, because historically Skid Row's had, these warehouses, big trucks driving through. We've got these homeless folks. We got a community now. We need more trees. Of course, trees help the environment, on and on and on with climate change and all the climate fights. We're big on that. And so they've planted over 300 trees.
That's great.
They're caring for hundreds more. They're just an amazing group. So Industrial District Green, you can find them on all over social media.
Okay.
Me personally, I'm on Facebook under General Jeff. I'm on Instagram at Skid Row General Jeff. I'm on Twitter at Go Skid Row Go. My email address is spelled out issuesandsolutions@yahoo.com. ISSUESANDSOLUTIONS. I used to give out my cell phone number, but now I get all these, crank calls and all these robocalls, so I don't do that. But I'm available 24/7. We've got some very serious issues going on. There's a lawsuit involving a federal judge, David Carter. He's kicking up a lot of dust. I'm walking through the community with him, sharing our perspective, and he's ready to come down really, really hard on both the city of LA and the county of LA. So you heard it here first. Stay tuned.